the world's oldest baby. The Ohio boy was born from an embryo frozen in 1994, and he was conceived in a lab by a couple using IVF, which was relatively new at the time. His adoptive parents found the embryo through a Christian adoption embryo agency.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another reaction. So today we're going to be talking and reacting to a baby that's born from an embryo frozen in 1994. The embryo is older than Google, it's older than a PlayStation 1 and also Toy Story. Absolutely wild, but honestly it's not just wild, it's kind of beautiful. So this baby was born in Ohio from an embryo frozen over 30 years ago. The parents found it through a Christian embryo adoption agency. I mean, imagine filing out paperwork to adopt something that technically predates Friends being on TV and then having it result in an actual human child. That's just astonishing. So let's talk about it. Dive in, please like, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you can stay updated on all current and future videos.
Are marveling at what's being called the world's oldest baby. The Ohio boy was born from an embryo frozen in 1994, and he was conceived in a lab by a couple using IVF, which was relatively new at the time. His adoptive parents found the embryo through a Christian adoption embryo agency. And so for more on all this, I want to bring in ABC News medical contributor, Dr. Alok Patel. And Dr. Patel, happy Friday. Thanks for joining us. But first, this is a record, and it's really kind of remarkable. But what's the reaction in the medical community to this news?
What a story. How amazing for the genetic parents of that embryo to be able to gift their embryo to another family to help them to create their own family. The embryo being 30 years old. It's just remarkable. It's a wonderful gift for a family to give to another family when they're not going to be using that embryo for themselves. This is what makes this world such a lovely place when you have people like that, being able to adopt an embryo. It's really hard for some intended parents to think about what they're going to do with their embryos if they're not using them for themselves. It's a tough conversation for people to have. I fully appreciate and acknowledge that. But when you choose, if you choose to give your embryos up for adoption, this is the gift that you give to other people. And I think it's just amazing.
And think this is sci-fi, this is something of the future, but some of the physicians and scientists I've talked to are like, hey, no, this is what we can do with reproductive science and technology. The fertility doctors I've talked to, the reproductive endocrinologists, see this headline and say, yes, spread awareness that we can keep these embryos frozen for a very long period of time. But if you look at the broader conversation among the healthcare community, this really sits in that Venn diagram of human biology and development, scientific advancement, and ethics and individuality in kind of making these decisions for families. So yes, call it a scientific marvel, appreciate science, and realize that there's a lot of humanity in this story.
Well, and that's a really good point, Doc, but
And look at technology, look at our labs, look at science, look at how far, embryologists and the technology that we have in our labs, like across the world, to be able to store an embryo for that long. It's amazing. It's so clever. And it's crazy when you say this embryo is 30 years old and now this embryo has brought life. And often people worry, we have intended parents now going through our pathways with my surrogacy journey, and they worry at how long can my embryo stay frozen if we're not, we want to future-proof our families. And we say your embryo can stay frozen for many years. This is proof. Your embryos are fine. They maintain the temperature that they're frozen at, and they can stay frozen for many, many years. This is proof. The technologies that the embryologists and the labs use protects that embryo and your gametes for a long period of time. It is so clever.
Also kind of curious, implanting older embryos, is it more of a risk?
From everything that the data suggests and what I've talked to about the experts here, the only risk or the only higher risk situation really comes at the age of the woman when the embryo was frozen. But if the embryo successfully can be thawed and passes screening, the risk is exactly the same. It could be an embryo that's been frozen for a few months or one that's been frozen for 30 years. Because remember, this baby was born at term and is fully healthy. So that actual freezing process is what matters. And that process has actually advanced over time. After the year 2000, the new method of cryopreservation is even more advanced with a higher success rate when it comes to thawing.
Well, and so with that in mind, are you expecting to see older embryos, become more of a trend with IVF?
In general, we are seeing higher rates of ART, that's assisted reproductive technology, and IVF is one of them. So there is an unknown question about what is going to happen with these potential millions of frozen embryos across the world. But Alex, we see that CDC birth rates are going down. The request for IVF is actually going up. About 2 to 3% of U.S. births are born from ART, and that's higher in some states, and it's unfortunately lower in other states as well, where people may want to seek this technology, but may not be able to because of access, healthcare policy in that state, or insurance coverage.
Well, and lastly, obviously something like this grabs headlines and it's fun to talk about, but are there ethical questions here?
That's exactly right. So there are ethical questions, and these are questions that we should be asking and making sure that people are on the same page with, because it affects state-by-state policy. One of the biggest questions is, what is the future of frozen embryos that may not be put up for adoption? What is the ethical consideration when it comes to research, and who actually owns, I may say that, when it comes to embryos? So we have to have these conversations while we are talking about advancements in science and celebrating new births.
All good points. Dr. Alok Patel, thank you so much. Right now, doctors...
Stripping it all back for a second, a family who hadn't met their child yet adopted an embryo that spent 30 years frozen in time. That's just a little bit younger than me, but we won't go into the numbers. And now that child exists. That's not sci-fi, that's science, that's hope, that's timing, and a little bit of a miracle, all in one. And whether people approach this from a medical angle, a faith perspective, or an ethical one, you can't deny we're living in a world where parenthood can begin in ways that were unthinkable a generation ago. It's just extraordinary. Would you freeze an embryo for decades if you had the option? Let me know what you would do or what you think in the comments, as I'd love to know what you guys think. What do you believe are the scientific and ethical ramifications of this, and what the future of IVF could be in the future? Let us know what you think below. But if you do, keep it kind, keep it respectful, as we always encourage a healthy debate. As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you can stay updated on all current and future videos, and we'll see you next time. Bye.